Hello and welcome to everyone joining us here today on this call. My name is Mark Bruce, Jura Whiskey's brand home manager here on the Isle of Jura at our wonderful distillery. And today I am joining you all from here within our cooperage bar. Just behind me is where we are actually making the spirit, which goes on to become our wonderful whiskey. And I thought what we could do just now is take you on a very small virtual tour of our wonderful village, Craig House, and into our single malt whiskey distillery.
Hello, it's Mark Bruce here, Jura Whiskey's brand home manager, wanting to welcome you all to the Isle of Jura. This evening we're going to begin our virtual tour in Craig House, which is Jura's main village and home to the majority of just the 212 people living within our tiny island community. Craig House is where you will find our one pub and hotel, our community store that supports life here on our island, and of course the Jura single malt whiskey distillery. All of this is shared with more than 6,000 red deer that also call Jura home. And for those of you wanting to explore more of the island, you can take the one long road past the Paps there at the top of the screen, head towards the north end of the island where you can visit Barn Hill and onto the Quarry Wrekin, which is one of the world's largest whirlpools. So let's go into the distillery. And reopening in 1963 to bring prosperity back to our island, the Jura Distillery to this day remains an integral part of the island's community. We're currently employing 17 of just the 212 people that call Jura home. From either beds or crisp maltings, all malted barley used at our distillery is brought over from the mainland's east coast. We currently receive 26 tonnes of malt 7 days a week for about 11 months of the year. Six bins on site capable of sustaining production continuously for a 7-day period. And outside of a 4-week peated malt run in early spring, Jura whiskey is made from entirely unpeated malt. We head upstairs into our mill room, which is home to a 4-roll Porteous mill purchased second-hand in 1963, which is crushing 5 tonnes of malt and 20 kilo tips for mashing in. The 5 tonnes of grist will now be added to our stainless steel semi-lauter mash tun to begin mashing in. 44,000 litres of hot water is added in 3 stages at varying temperatures to begin breaking down the starch into fermentable sugars for fermentation. We are currently running 4 mashes per day, which totals 28 a week. All draft left over from mashing in will now make its way back to Campbelltown, where it will be used to feed dairy cows. It takes 2 mashes or 49,000 litres of wort to fill one of our 6 washbacks here at the Jura Distillery. 150 kilos of distiller's yeast will then be added to commence what is a 54-hour fermentation. And our still house is home to what are considered some of the tallest wash and low wine pot stills in the Scotch whisky industry. This allows us to produce a consistently light, fruity and floral new make spirit. First distillation, which will run for 6 to 7 hours, requires 1 washback or 49,000 litres of wash to be split between our 2 wash stills. The wash is now heated to a temperature of 110 degrees in order to begin vaporization. The remaining 16,000 litres of low wines now commences its second distillation at a slightly lower temperature for a period of about 10 hours. The heart of our low wines run, or middle cut, will now be taken at between 71 and 64 degrees of pure alcohol. 4,000 litres of new make spirit is now held until filling in one of our intermediate spirit receivers. Upon filling in American white oak ex-bourbon casks, we'll dilute our new make spirit to 63.5% in order to slow evaporation during maturation. And with 5 warehouses here on site, we're capable of maturing up to 31,000 casks. This means that with an annual production of 2.4 million litres of spirit a year, the rest of our new make is currently being stored in the Gordon for maturation. On average, we lose 2% of our spirit in the first year and 1% every year after that to the angel share. Average annual temperatures move no higher than 9 degrees, which provides us with a slow and consistent maturation, heavily influenced by the Gulf Stream. Cask types here include some sherry butts, some very old hogsheads that date back to the early and mid 70s, and of course, ex-bourbon.
So moving on with the presentation, and I think it's a very important place to start. For those of you that perhaps not visited Jura, it can be one of the most, simply is one of the most rewarding. Of course, our distillery has been here for a very long time. In fact, our distillery was established in 1810, and there was a number of key dates which happened over the course of the next 90 years before our distillery was closed in 1901, and that was our distillery was officially licensed in 1831. And what is known as the Jura Distillery today was formerly known as Small Isles Distillery, and it was named as such in 1876. Unfortunately, due to a discrepancy over the lease agreement, the owners and the tenants at the time in 1901 were unable to come to an agreement on what the future would look like and went their separate ways. 1920, 19 years later, the owners of the estate and the Jura Distillery at the time decided to remove the roof from this wonderful distillery. And when you take a roof off a building here on Jura, it pretty much falls down immediately with all of that wild weather and heavy rain that we see throughout the winter. Fast forward into the mid-50s, and this wonderful island was really suffering at the hands of depopulation from what was once a thriving island community and thriving population of best part 1,500 people. Really did see that deplete all the way down to about 100 people living on the island. So a number of the estate owners came together in the 1950s, as well as a well-known architect, William Dale Evans, and hatched a plan to revitalize the Jura Distillery, rebuild it, bring it back to life. And the main reason for that was to bring people back to this wonderful island, to create opportunity, to create employment, and get people living and working within our community. In 1963, the Jura Distillery reopened and has been producing spirit and whiskey ever since. A number of key dates which run throughout the 70s and 80s allowed the distillery to upgrade from what was essentially wood at the time, moved into more modern day technology. We saw a number of the washbacks, everything upgraded into stainless steel. In 1999, we once again went back to producing some peated malt or smoky whiskey, and from there, we've only looked forward to a bright and promising future. So for those that you have perhaps not visited Jura, the best way to describe it is that we are situated on the west coast of Scotland, about 40 to 50 miles west of Glasgow. And we are situated right between the peninsula of Campbelltown. This island is known for its heavy peated whiskies. We are in the middle. Jura is as wild and as rugged as it comes across. And when you come down to visit us, you make your way from the Isle of Islay on a very small ferry across a fast moving body of water and land on this beautiful island. You'll turn to your right, hopefully in your car, or perhaps you'll jump on the bus, and you head down a single track road for 8 miles. All along the way, you are going to be treated to some of the most stunning wildlife that you will ever get to see in Scotland. Jura is home to sea eagles, golden eagles, you name it. We've got amazing, wonderful birds of prey. You are also going to get to see the seals sunning themselves along the shoreline. You're also going to see those little otters snacking on the seaweed. And if you're lucky enough, you may well see a dolphin and whales as well in the summer. 8 miles later, you've arrived down in the village of Craycast. You've gone past best part of maybe 20 to 30 deer along the way. This island is also home to more than 5,000 red deer, and it is also where we derive the name or the word Jura from the Old Norse language meaning Deer Island. When you arrive down into the village of Craycast, you are of course going to meet our community. And the community here on Jura is the foundation of life on this wonderful island. It is where you are going to have many different conversations with many different people. The people here on Jura are just as curious as the deer are when they watch you going by as you head down to the village. And they're going to want to come up and speak to you. They want to ask who you are and where you're from and learn about your story. So make sure you grab a beer, grab a dram of whiskey in the pub and tell everyone all about who you are and where you've come from. As I mentioned earlier, the population here on Jura is best part of 212 people, the majority of which are all employed, working across the distillery, working in the pub and hotel, working in our community store, or a number of other small little businesses that support the economy here on this island. There is also a number of estates that offer good working opportunities and plenty of work for people willing to work hard. Once you've settled in here on Craycast and you've gotten to know a few people that live on the island, once you're right wherever you may well be, and you are going to see, smell and want to taste our single malt whiskey. We've been here for a very long time and it's a very, very busy part of the island. There will be casks being rolled up and down the road. You will be able to smell the fermenting washbacks, and when you come into the distilleries, you're of course going to see those amazing stills. Our whiskey is all about being bright, it's all about being lively, and it's all about being fruity for every one of our customers. It's smooth, bright and lively, as I said, just like the islanders that make it. Our whiskey reflects a style of those people that live here on our island and tells the story of each and every one of the people that make it. We mainly work here at the distillery with unpeated malt. As I mentioned earlier, we run in 26 tons of unpeated malt every single day coming across from the mainland. We run the unpeated malt here at the distillery for about 10 months of the year. However, in the early spring, we do choose to run heavy peated malt through our stills, which is no more than about 5% of our production. And that commenced, as I showed you before on the timeline, in 1999. And what Greg Glass and the blending team does later down the track, once that peated malt has had time to mature in those wonderful ex-bourbon casks, is bring in a little bit of that peated malt at the blending stage, at the marrying stage before bottling, and uses it almost like seasoning, salt and pepper like you get in food, to add a little bit of muscle, a little bit of structure to our whiskey. You can almost detect it in form of bitter chocolate, mocha, coffee, espresso, things like that. A little bit of spice as well. Cask enhancement. So if we're not maturing our whiskey here in ex-bourbon casks, which is about 31,000 casks on the island at the moment, we do ship the spirit away back to the mainland, up to Invergordon, which is home to White Mackay. And this is also where whiskies that we have within our portfolio are handled in their final stages. Here we are lucky enough to work with ex-bourbon, we work with sherry casks, red wine casks, we work with rum casks, we're trialing, we're working with Scottish oak, and there's a number of wonderful whiskies coming up in the future that you're all going to get to see that are very, very, very exciting to be a part of. Whiskey making team will bring together each component or each of these component parts, as I said, at the bottling stage. Unpeated Jura that is being matured in ex-bourbon casks. We use a little bit of peated Jura, like seasoning, salt and pepper, bring that together, and then we get our final whiskies. Now, I am aware that over there in India, you are currently working with our wonderful Jura 10-year-old, the beating heart of the signature series. And this is perhaps one of my most favorite whiskies. Initial maturation for the Jura 10-year-old is in American White Oak's ex-bourbon casks. It's a whiskey at 40%. Here it is, just in case you've not got one in front of you. And it's enhanced in Oloroso sherry casks for, generally speaking, 12 to 24 months. So this whiskey has a wonderful peach, apricot, fruity freshness to it, which can be found across the majority of the range. But what the Oloroso sherry finish does, it brings in another layer of flavor, and it starts to add muscle and structure to this whiskey. We get rich dark chocolate notes, we get a little bit of coffee and espresso with a nice winter spice. I would encourage all of you to play with the Jura side your favorite beer, or if you do, and I would encourage all of you to do it, is put it into your favorite whiskey-based cocktails and see how it goes. Now, for those of you that may well be interested, some of you may be thinking, where did these sherry casks come from? White & Mackay as a business is very lucky to own the Harvey's Bodega down in southern Spain, as well as have some wonderful relationships and partnerships with Gonzalez Bias and some of those big producers of barrels down there. So we are able to draw from some of the best bodegas and get our hands on some of the finest sherry casks. These flavors, these casks really do start to play their role in the finished product of this Jura whiskey. Now, I hope you're all very excited and looking forward to the next development or the next release into the Indian market, and that is the Jura 12-year-old. What we have here is a whiskey that's been matured in the exact same way. Initial maturation is in these wonderful ex-bourbon casks coming out of the US. And then for an additional 12 to 24 months, a proportion of the whiskey is matured in these Oloroso sherry casks, again, coming from southern Spain. Now, there is only a 2-year difference between the two, but when you start to taste these whiskies and you start to play with them in your cocktails or have them alongside your beer, you will realize there's a significant difference. That additional 2 years provides the 12-year-old is sweeter, it's bigger, and there's a lot more of a richer, almost honeyed sweetness, licorice, banana, some would say tropical fruit notes to the whiskey. You've got the wonderful sweetness there coming from the ex-bourbon, giving you vanilla, cinnamon, again with the layers of chocolate. You've got banana, I find pineapple, peach, apricot. There's a lot going inside this whiskey, and it's definitely one that you should all be looking forward to when it arrives in your market. Look, that was a very, very quick tasting. I hope you've enjoyed the tour. For any of you that may well have questions, please reach out. We'll get those answered for you. And of course, from everyone here at the Jura Distillery and on Jura, we look forward to welcoming you to this wonderful island and our distillery.